I honestly feel like it was really hard. I think when people say that fundraising is a full-time job, I didn't understand what that meant until we were really in that process. I think Abhinav and I, are lucky in a number of ways. We graduated from Stanford and we've spent the past 4 or so years in the Bay Area, which is an incredible ecosystem for any founder, especially any first-time founder. And we also had the opportunity to go through an accelerator program from one of the top VCs. And so that also really catapulted our progress and also allowed us to have a lot of great introductions.
Welcome to Inside Startup Funding, where you get to learn about raising capital from founders who have just done it. I'm Helena Fogarty. I'm a fundraising expert who helps startups raise their seed and Series A rounds. And today I'm speaking with Jenny Duan and Abhinav Agarwal, co-founders of Clare Health. The wearable market has reached record growth, valued at $96 billion, with 35% of women using a wearable daily for fitness and wellness tracking. Yet no technology has been built to continuously monitor hormones. Until now. Clare is building the world's first continuous hormone monitoring wearable, a wrist device that tracks estrogen, progesterone, LH, and FSH in real time, without blood draws, urine tests, or needles. Jenny is a CEO. Jenny graduated early from Stanford with a degree in symbolic systems, AI ethics, and social systems, and Abhinav is CTO. He's from Jaipur, India. He studied computer science at Stanford and got a BS and an MS. Before Clare, he worked on non-invasive physiological sensing and wearable machine learning at a health tech startup in Palo Alto. They met at Stanford in spring of 2025, founded Clare shortly after graduation, came out of stealth in February, and they have a hardware launch planned for later this year. Clare Health just announced the closing of a new seed round, bringing total funding to date to $11.6 million, led by Khosla Ventures with support from A16Z Speedrun, Bridge Club, Tree Hub, Carton Capital, AGI House, Insiders VC, and Wojcicki, and more. So let's figure out how they made that happen. Jenny and Abhinav, thank you so much for coming in today. It's so great to get you here virtually. We were trying to do this in person when you were in New York a couple weeks ago for Tech Week, but we couldn't make it happen. So I really appreciate you coming in virtually. If I understand it correctly, is today when you're announcing the funding?
Yes, we just announced it this morning, so we're super excited to be here, and it's been a really exciting day so far.
Very cool. So have you gotten overloaded by salespeople contacting you yet?
We haven't opened our LinkedIn, but
Okay,
likely when I
excellent.
open it.
So I'd love to back it up a little bit to get to more of the origin story of Claire. Tell me when and why women's health is a passion for you.
Yeah, so growing up, I think my family and those around me always emphasized women's health as something that was driven more through intuition. We knew that at certain times, these things happen to your body, and as you age, there's a lot of changes that aren't often talked about, like perimenopause and menopause. But growing up, there wasn't any science to show what actually is going on under the hood. We have trackers for almost everything. I grew up with people in my family who had diabetes, so I looked at CGMs, looked at finger pricks. I watched as my parents got their first Apple Watches, and as I did too. But women's health always was something that seemed like a huge mystery or black box, even to me. In high school, I'm from Portland, Oregon. I began volunteering at this organization called Rose Haven, which is a day shelter serving women and children experiencing domestic violence and homelessness. And throughout the years, I got more and more involved with that organization, eventually joining the board there and started to learn more about the systemic gaps that women were experiencing. So the stories that I was hearing in my own home were just things that were limited to my own home, but rather a pattern that I saw reflected again and again and again across age ranges, across demographics, cities, and it always seemed frustrating that there wasn't a concrete source of data or a source of ground truth for the female body. When I came to Stanford, I got sucked straight into the startup ecosystem. In my sophomore year, I even built an app for people with endometriosis, and that got me excited about the opportunity that I think innovation, that technology has to advance more research in the field of women's health and to build solutions that actually help women. And so when I was thinking about how I spend my time and what is the most important way I can spend my time, I eventually came to this idea that I would build something in the women's health space and building off of my experience in the nonprofit sector and looking for a way to directly impact the lives of the women around me.
Very cool. So, in between like the endometriosis app and creating Claire, what made you decide Claire was the right one to go with?
Yeah, so I think that it really came down to the opportunity that I was seeing with new research, new sensors coming out, and new hardware. I watched as new form factors came out, watched as more and more people around me were wearing wearables, but at the same time, I continuously struggled with the same period tracking apps that weren't even accurate for my irregular cycle. And so this is something that just continued to frustrate me, and it was something I couldn't let go of. Before starting Clara, I was actually taking this class looking at the state of funding and research in women's health. And actually, around that time is when I met Abhinav, my co founder. And so Claire came out of a series of conversations then.
Excellent. And Abhinav, you were working in non invasive physiological sensing before this. Can you tell me a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was working on wearables where we were trying to do non-invasive CGM monitoring with a wearable. And what I was seeing is there were a lot of subtle physiological changes that happen throughout the body as these biomarkers change in real time. And I was working on the machine learning models to pick up those signals. So that was around the time when Jenny and I met, and we had this series of conversations around the gaps we were seeing and the unaddressed needs that we were seeing around women's health. Because the rooms that I was in, what I was seeing was like anything that was supposed to be sold to women, like it was there was a lot of pink washing going on instead of a product being built from the ground up to actually support the needs for what women need. And we felt like hormones, given they are the underlying operating system of women's health and they lead to plethora of conditions, they can help explain a plethora of conditions, like just if we have enough data on them. That's something that really drove us to start working on Claire.
Yeah. And I think that, perimenopause and menopause are getting more of a spotlight at the particular moment. But many women, and we mentioned endometriosis, but many women realize later on in their life that hormones have been really driving certain things in their lives without them knowing it. Either hormone imbalances or, how it affects the body. And nobody, well, I'm sure people have been looking at this to a certain extent, but we do know that women's health and studies have been underfunded. So that's been understudied, in my opinion, at least. So tell me, how did you guys meet?
Absolutely. Well, we met at Stanford actually in my junior year. We had met on sort of a number of trips, the first to LA and then later connected just across campus. And I think what really inspired us to start the company together was our shared vision for what we see as the future of healthcare. I think Abhinav, and maybe you want to touch more on this, coming from Jaipur, India, and growing up in, you want to share more about your background, but in an area where healthcare maybe wasn't the most accessible. And for me, like seeing my parents and my grandparents navigate the healthcare system was something that really frustrated me in an area that I really wanted to make an impact in.
Yeah, Abhinav, I'd love to hear, if you can fill in the blanks that we were referring to.
No, yeah. So I grew up in India, then got a scholarship to come to Stanford. Like during that time, like while I was in school, actually had no idea I was gonna come to States. So was just like an amazing opportunity to come here to do my bachelor's and master's. During that time, got to work on several incredible projects from pediatric advanced study like by Apple, um, and worked at labs, worked on various other wearables. And as Jenny and I were having those series of conversations, Jenny was organizing this Next Creator Collective on campus, where she was bringing on hundreds of influencers on campus to uh, do several mini projects, kind of like a mini conference to the state. A lot of those connections are in place, and those influencers who were part of that went on to do great things with like several startups. So that was something where we were in talks to do something with my previous company, and like that was kind of how like we started having these deeper series of conversations around like my interests and her interests.
Can I ask, is there a lot of pressure when you're at Stanford to start a company? Is it like what's done?
Not really. I think Stanford, from what the way I experienced it, is a very like a free for all place in terms of like, for instance, one thing that I really did during my time at Stanford is like growing up, I didn't really get to do engage in activities that would allow creative expression. So at Stanford, I decided like every single quarter I would do one activity, be it improv, be it blue photography, be it tango, or something that allows for that. So Stanford, I believe, is a very free for all place where like people go on to do amazing things across various domains. But yes, being in Bay Area, I think, is more of a thing where, like which you are in the startup space, everyone's doing something, and like you just end up finding an unaddressed need and trying to solve it.
Yeah, that's amazing. And Jenny, again, I just want to think like, did you even consider going for it with the endometriosis app, or was it, that's not a good idea? How did you determine that and move forward with Claire?
Yeah, I think when I first built the app, it actually came out of a hackathon. So Stanford does an annual hackathon called Tree Hacks, and my app was a project for that. At the time, I wasn't thinking seriously about commercializing a business or building a startup. I was just curious about the different avenues to make impact. I feel like this has been a central thread of the time I spent at Stanford. I've worked across startups, including Daydream in New York City. I've also worked in Washington, D.C. at think tanks and explored careers in finance. And so I've always been really curious about the best avenue for impact. And I think it wasn't until I started building Claire that I realized or that I saw myself in a position to use startups as the biggest lever for impact. But today I feel really grateful about that choice. And I think that it will be really, I think, fruitful and hopefully, help advance research in women's health, which is what I'm most care about.
Yeah, I love that. So let's get to it. What does Claire do? Tell me.
Yeah, so Claire is the first hormone-aware monitor out there. We track estrogen, progesterone, LH, and FSH, providing insights into these hormones in real time, which no other wearable device does. We use a proprietary approach, and this allows us to actually track these hormones and how they interact with other symptoms throughout the body, allowing for more accurate cycle prediction, accurate cycle phase classification, as well as looking at patterns in hormones that might give people insight into things like energy levels and other day to day experiences.
That's amazing. How can I get one? Or when can I get one?
You can pre-order one today. We are shipping our first launch. We actually sold out our first batch, but we will start shipping devices starting this November.
That's amazing. That's so cool. I just had my gynecological appointment yesterday and had to do some blood tests. So it's really cool to see that there's other ways of getting this information. Um, so the signals were already there in some existing wearables, I think. How do you guys track this without getting, taking blood?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the wearable tech has not evolved in the past 10 years in the sense that it's the same set of sensors, be it like PPG sensor, and like lately, like most of the wearable insights around women's health, like in the existing wearables, are based on temperature sensor, and then like to track motion activity, like it's a combination of accelerometer and gyroscope, which are good enough to track like things like HRV, steps, and plethora of other things. But to be able to track hormones, like first of all, the sensor tech needed to evolve, which it has in the last 2 or 3 years. Like we're able to miniaturize a few proprietary sensors that would go into our wearable. We were able to advance like the ML research around the female biology body model that we are building, which then takes into that super high fidelity data from all these sensors and converts that into these insights. So that is something which we had to do. But in terms of signals that were already there, is there are hormone receptors all over a woman's body, and like as these hormones fluctuate, it causes these physiological triggers, which in turn can be measured, like if the sensors are sensitive enough.
I'm super excited about the possibilities, even when you're talking about this. Like just to understand more about my health and for other people to understand more about their health, other women. Um, Now, many people have been out there pitching cycle tracking as, apps or whatever they're doing. You guys are not including that, is that correct?
So what we're not building is a glorified logbook or a calendar where like people have to log their periods again, 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 and it just puts them on an average of 28 to 30 day cycle, which is not true for 30% of the women who have irregular cycles. So what we want to build is a tool which allows you to passively monitor things the way you can do for heart rate, the way you can do for HRV steps and all of that. So while cycle tracking is definitely useful because when a woman walks into an OBGYN's office, their cycle history is a very important biomarker. It's almost the fifth uh crucial biomarker apart from blood pressure and everything else that is usually normally taken. So that is definitely something they would have access to without the effort of logging their thing every day.
That's cool. And how do you manage privacy for this data?
Yeah, I think we're at a very sensitive time where we're seeing, other companies which are supposed to support women be in lawsuits for data, selling data and other harms for their users. And this has been a priority for us from day one. We take care to encrypt all of the data. We use zero knowledge encryption, which means that only the person who owns the data, so the user of the app, has access to it. And even if we got subpoenaed for some reason, or if any external party wanted to access the data, it would be fully encrypted. In addition to that, we use edge computing, which means that all the models live on the user's own devices, which also is important in case, they for cybersecurity and also for personal privacy. We also never sell or share data.
I love that. I mean, I love your answer to that, but I also just think that that's so important because I've been in conversations with people talking about this kind of data and suggesting that there might be a world where your employer knows that you're pregnant before you do, or your employer knows things about you before you do, which can be really scary. So privacy is super important in this space. Um, we talked about how you guys found each other, which is great. What were your first conversations like when you were thinking about building something?
I think that we really connected in terms of the vision that we want to see for the future of healthcare and also how we think impact should be made. I think both of us are coming from a bit of a non traditional background in that none of us have spent a significant amount of time inside the healthcare system. Now, on our team, we do have a chief medical officer who's a reproductive endocrinologist, an OBGYN, and other clinical advisors. But as two people with candidly without medical degrees, I think that we really connected about the perspective on bringing innovation to this space, and we think that by thinking differently, we can almost challenge the status quo that things are impossible or that they take decades to build. I think that that's always been what drew me into startups, really the opportunity to make change and push innovation at a scale that oftentimes doesn't happen inside the lab. And so I think that our shared values of championing women's health innovation, and also just building a tool that women need but doesn't currently exist is something that we're both really passionate about.
Yeah, and sometimes it takes someone from outside to shake things up and move things faster. So I love that. We're seeing that a little bit in New York with our current mayor. All these things that people have said are impossible, he's coming in and making real headway on, and it's incredible to watch. It's incredibly be part of it. You're pursuing FDA clearance, which many wearables don't. What is that? Why? Why do that?
Yeah, I think so. We definitely want Claire to be super accessible. That's one of the reasons like we are starting with direct to consumer so that anyone who is willing and wants to access this data, they can uh, just purchase the device without needing to wait for insurance approvals and all of that. But the reason we are pursuing FDA clearances for certain claims is we want people to, as they use this, we want them to feel confident that the data they're getting is accurate, that the use cases that they might want to use it for is something that can be used in clinical settings as well. So that's our end goal because we see Claire as a women's health platform for the next decade, not just as a wearable company.
So do you think that give me some context on that. Does FDA clearance give your data and the data that you're collecting more credibility when I'm talking to my doctor, or like what do you see as opening as FDA clearance opening up for your users?
I think the one thing that FDA clearance would open is it would open reimbursement pathways for people to be able to get Clare through their insurance. Whereas right now we are also HSA FSA eligible and pre-approved for eligible users, but that would allow like more people to be able to access Clare and data. It would allow us to integrate into clinical settings where OBGYNs or doctors or primary care physicians, they will be able to access the data right away in their dashboard instead of a user having to share their screenshots because one the way like current wearables work or the way that users currently share their wearable data with their doctors is like they take screenshots on their phones and then they show those versus like having that data accessible directly would truly like change the care paradigm for women.
That's great. And I apologize if that was sort of redundant, my question. We had an air conditioning turn on here, so it made it a little bit harder to hear. But I think I love your answer on that. So, when did you guys get started on the idea?
We have been working on it for over a year now. First few months were spent prototyping, doing the studies, like getting enough conviction, and then we raised like uh, end of last year, like a pre-seed round, and then we closed that out with a seed round.
Yeah, it's amazing. Um, and so you went from idea to out of stealth. The device will be ready and in people's hands in November.
Yes.
Um, that's pretty quick.
Yeah, I think the old paradigm like of hardware where like it takes like, years to ideate and years to build. I think that has to change given the world we are living in. And we have an incredible team like that we started with, like incredible team of hardware engineers, embedded engineers, firmware engineers who have helped us achieve this goal, and also incredible set of partners as well, be it our product design firm, be it like other external partners who have helped us move fast.
Yeah, that's great. So let's talk fundraising because you just mentioned that you raised a smaller round at the end of last year, and now you're announcing a larger round with some amazing investors. Um, Walk me through how you started to raise for this, and when you started to raise for this originally.
Yeah, I think that we hit an inflection point sort of last October where we realized that we had a breakthrough that we didn't see anywhere else, and we wanted to be the ones to take this to life. And so we raised our first angel round shortly after that. Actually, think about
15 days after that.
15 days after our first decision, which was our earliest angels were Tree Hub by AIHF, which is a health-focused fund based in the Bay Area. And shortly after that, we were lucky enough to be accepted into the A16Z Speedrun program, which is an early stage accelerator that I think really equipped us for our seed fundraise and for all of the challenges and privileges of building an early stage company. So we were grateful to go through that program, and then after that, we spent around a month and a half to 2 months doing our formal seed fundraise, which we just closed.
Yeah, that's all. I mean, I'll tell you, that's not the norm. That's not the norm for every founder, right? That's pretty quick. So, can you tell me a little bit more about how you got that first angel round?
Yeah, I think it was serendipitous timing as Tree Hub by HF had just kicked off at the time. So we were new, they were new. They were at the time looking for AI in health companies. So companies that are using AI to solve some dimension or aspect in healthcare. And so we had the opportunity to pitch at their weekly meeting, and then we actually got our decision back the same day. So it was a very fast turnaround all around. And I believe, Abhinav, you had met Roxana from AI in medical imaging. You want to speak more about that?
Yeah, I work with the Stanford Center for AI in Medicine and Imaging, and Roxana serves as a mentor there for several groups. So I, had known her from there, and then, yeah, Triab has been an incredible partner, and they have been one of our most vocal partners since the day zero.
So how critical was your relationship to getting in front of Tree Hub, do you think?
I think we actually didn't directly like go through Roxana. It was through another advisor. Like I had met like Esther before, Esther Wojcicki, and like I just emailed her. I just sent her a text on LinkedIn first, and then emailed her, like, "Hey, we are building this. Would love to get your thoughts." And she connected us with Tree Hub, and like we sent our deck to Tree Hub, met with them, and then they invited us to pitch at their weekly meeting. We pitched to the investment committee, and then they got us a decision like the same day. And then Roxana was in the meeting too, and she was like, "Yeah, I wanna support you guys with this."
That's amazing. Very cool. And can you tell me a little bit about Speedrun? What was that program like?
Speedrun was amazing. I think we were really lucky to be in the cohort and work with the partners that we did, Emily Bennett and Josh Liu. I think that if I could say anything about speedrun, I think that it's a community that really pushes you to grow, to think bigger than you imagined, and to make a difference. I feel like every single founder that I talked to at Speedrun was trying to make an impact in their line of work, regardless of whether they were trying to automate the forestry industry or if they were working on wearables for elder care or devices for elder care or if they were working on new games. I think I love the energy and the passion of the fellow founders, and I think that that makes all the difference when you're in an early stage accelerator.
And was that an in-person accelerator? Was it in near you? Was it in the Bay Area? Like where did you have were you there every day? What was it like?
It was in San Francisco, so our office is based in the South Bay, and we commuted about once a week to go to the weekly meetings there.
Cool. Awesome. What was the biggest surprise for you in terms of fundraising?
I think that it's this constant notion that women's health is niche. I think this is something that a lot of women's health founders hear over and over again. Whereas in reality, I mean, we know that from statistics, we know that women's health R&D, women only receive 2% of R&D funding in, healthcare. But women make up 50% of the population. And so when someone looks at me and tells me that women's health is niche, I actually believe that it is not niche at all. And so I think challenging that perception that women's health is only constrained to fertility or that women don't even care about women's health was honestly really surprising. I didn't expect to hear so much feedback on that end, but I'm also really grateful that I think the partners that we are working with and a lot of the investors throughout our process were really highly bought into our mission and also our vision as well. So I think there's both ends of the spectrum for sure.
Yeah, for me, I think it was the surprising thing was like most people were still living in that bikini medicine era from 1980s where like they would assume like all women's health issues are still like just everything is just related to fertility. Uh, and and I think there's a lot of re-education needed to be done there, but I'm glad we found a set of investors and set of backers like who truly believe in the mission and are aligned with what we want to build.
Are you are you aware that your fundraising process is not the norm necessarily? From over here, right? From over here in New York, it would be easy to write it off as an easy process because of the work that you've done in the past. So tell me how it was hard.
I honestly feel like it was really hard. I think when people say that fundraising is a full-time job, I didn't understand what that meant until we were really in that process. I think Abhinav and I are lucky in a number of ways. We graduated from Stanford and we've spent the past 4 or so years in the Bay Area, which is an incredible ecosystem for any founder, especially any first-time founder. And, we also had the opportunity to go through an accelerator program from one of the top VCs, and so that also really catapulted our progress and also allowed us to have a lot of great introductions. I think the one thing that I didn't realize about fundraising going into it is how relationship based everything is, whether it comes from a warm intro or the relationships that you're building with funds that you don't even end up working with, but still help you down the line, has been really moving for me. I think to see just the level of support that this ecosystem has. I think a lot of people perceive fundraising as something that is combative or competitive or a race. But when I was going through the process, I realized that people really want to help and support in any way they can, regardless of whether or not you end up working with them. And so I think that was a really positive takeaway. Abhinav, I don't know if you have anything to share about what you think fundraising was like, especially, growing up in a different country in a different place.
Yeah, I mean, growing up in India, like I'm first generation low income student from there, so had pretty much no prior exposure to fundraising or to like Bay Area startup scene or any of that. So got exposed to that a little bit during the time at Stanford. But as we were going through our own process, I think it was just something incredibly, I would say, rewarding in a way, like a challenge just to think like in or like push ourselves in areas where like even like expand like our vision for what we want to do, and like in several ways I think it helped us grow a lot, both as co-founders and as individuals as well. So I think that's been super rewarding.
Did you both go in well, did you do most of your pitching in person or virtually? And did you both do it, or did Jenny, you lead it? Like, how did the process go?
Yeah, I think most of our pitches were done virtually, although we had a number of in-person meetings all around the Bay. And I think fundraising was collaborative, so I found myself taking many of the intro calls and closing out most of the processes. But Abhinav was incredibly helpful with technical due diligence and sharing more about our technical innovation.
Yeah, I wanted to dive into that because I generally recommend that the CEO leads it and then brings in the other people in the second meeting, and was just checking that with you. But I also was interested in knowing um, if you feel like you faced any underestimation because you're young seeming and you're female and you're pitching femtech.
Absolutely, absolutely. I have honestly, a lot of stories, a number of which would probably need to be shared off the record. But I do think, when people perceive me, I'm very young. I'm 21 years old. I
Turning
just
22 tomorrow.
turning 22 tomorrow. Thanks, Abby. Just graduated from college. I'm also very short. I'm only 5 feet tall, and I think that when people perceive me, there's oftentimes like an initial reaction, like, "Oh, like you're younger than I expected," or whatnot. But I think that within our investors and the people who have supported us, we are really grateful that I think we have led with our science, our innovation, and research, and I think that's we've been able to get that across. I'm really lucky that at KV we work with Alex Morgan, who has an MD and PhD in this space and also has an electrical engineering background. So I think that all of our investors and our partners have truly been the right fit and the right backgrounds for the company that we're trying to build.
Do you have any tips for helping other founders evaluate and eliminate possible investors when they're going through this process?
I think they should talk to as many other founders as possible. When I found myself talking to the speedrun community, I found that a lot of my experiences, both negative and positive, were not one off. Like with investors that I maybe didn't have the best experience with, I found that a lot of my peers shared the same sentiment. And for investors that I had a great experience with, also like the same experience passed around. So I definitely think that there are patterns in the industry, and that if you talk to especially founders of existing portfolio companies, it can be a really great resource for um, deciding who to work with. I think that your choice of investors makes almost as much difference as your choice of early employees in terms of the way that your company will grow, maybe the direction that it will go in, and also the composition of the early team. So I think it matters a lot. I think maybe some people view fundraising as just a matter of funding. And I think while that is true to some extent, obviously you want your business to continue and you'll go, uh, that should be a priority. But the people that you choose to work with are also extremely important. So it's not just about capital, it's really about partnership, which is, I think, one thing that I didn't realize as much before going into this process.
So going into this process, did you ever did you ever stop a meeting when you saw, I guess, interest flagging? I've heard some investors actually coach founders, and I think it's actually brilliant, to start their pitch. and ask if we should go through the pitch deck or, just have a conversation. But check in about 5 minutes after the start of the call or the meeting. Say, does this sound interesting to you? And if they are not so interested, just say, well, why don't we end it here then? Um, I think
Cool.
it's kind of a power move. I think it's pretty brilliant, but most founders are worried about doing that because they really want to they're thinking about getting everybody in the round, right? And not being selective.
Ooh, I love that piece of feedback. I think that that is really, like you said, brilliant. I think that, you know, as a founder, you can kind of tell when a VC starts to lose interest, even mid conversation, candidly speaking. So I feel like it's probably better for everyone's time if you end the conversation early in a respectful way. I think what I've done is I tend to send an email before the conversation and give them a couple sentences about what we're doing and about, the current state of our fundraise, our target fundraise, and just a little bit about the company. And I think I've seen people either dive deeper from that point or respectfully decline. And I think it's a similar strategy where you kind of brief people on what you're doing, who you are, and they can make a call at that point. So that's what I've done, but I've never done it mid meeting before.
Yeah, because the cap table is only so big and time is super limited. So, as much as you can be selective about that process, I think that
Mhm.
really helps.
Yeah. And I think it's I mean, it might be a very abrupt, kind of direct thing to do, but I don't know, I think it's kind of brilliant. I wanna see I wanna talk to more people who have done it. Um, what has changed since you guys have closed the round? You just announced it. The money must be in the bank at this point. So what does this money open up for you?
I think it allows us to build our team and hire expand hiring. We have a goal of doubling our team by the end of this, well, summer ambitiously, but year. So definitely building out our founding team, but beyond that, to fund manufacturing, to fund a number of research studies that we're pursuing, and to really bring this product to life this November.
And, I don't know, can you show us what the hardware looks like? Is there something you could show us or share with us that we
Yeah,
can insert?
absolutely a video right now. So there we go.
It's good.
Excellent. Very cool. And what's the price point?
It's retailing at $369, but founding members get 20% off.
Very nice. Very cool. So looking at the next year, what do you guys need to get right?
I think that it's all about building continuous trust with our users. That's ultimately what's going to be the backbone of our company. So, with hardware, there's this saying that hardware is hard. There's a lot of moving pieces, everything from supply chain, third party logistics, manufacturers often overseas, distribution, marketing. But at the end of the day, what we really care about is how can we best serve our users and the women who believe in us? And if we can honor that mission and deliver a product that hopefully blows their mind and exceeds their expectations, then we are we think that our company will be on a good path.
Cool. Do you have any tips for founders who are considering starting their pre-seed raise?
I would think carefully about what you want to unlock with that pre-seed raise and what are the immediate objectives that you want to hit within the next 30 days, 60 days, 90 days after that. Because pre-seed is oftentimes, I think about it as I almost like idea validation or just get it off the ground. I think that sometimes founders optimize for perfection, and that's definitely a trap that I've fallen into myself. But I think when it comes to pre-seed funding, think about how committed are you to this idea. When we raised our pre-seed at that point, I knew I had to graduate early. I left school at that point. Abhinav left his last job, so we committed all in. We knew that if we wanted to, take other people's capital and really become stewards of our investors' capital, then we needed to be really serious about the company that we were trying to build, the goals that we were going to achieve, and the team that we were trying to build. And so I think that nowadays with the um, rise in, AI tools, coding and vibe coding, a lot of startups are starting to look more like projects and vice versa. So I think that for anyone who's thinking about raising a pre-seed, they should just be intentional about what that funding will be used for and also how they see that company evolving and the opportunity there.
I love that because that takes kind of, we always have milestones for the money, but that really takes it into kind of a loose plan into here's what we're going to do in the next 90 days. And
Yeah.
that also maps it out for the team, which is fantastic. What do you both wish you knew a year ago?
That we would be here. I think a lot of our challenges would have been much easier if we knew we would land here after all of the challenges.
Ooh, I think for me, it's that um just that we would have built a community of tens of thousands of women who are really supporting us and who are really, I think, the trailblazers in our mission. I think I every day am kind of in awe of the response that we are, continuing to get from the public, from just people who come across our story. And I think that's been a really important part of our mission.
That's fantastic. And then lastly, because I know you guys are building a very fast growing business and you're both super accomplished, super driven. How do you take care of yourself?
Oh, I feel like it's always a push and pull. Like there's always times where you need to give everything to the company, and I feel like recently it's been a lot of that. But for me and for Abby, maybe I suspect too, I really prioritize physical movement. I think it's one of the most important parts of my day and the way that I clear my mind. And so just finding any way to be active, whether that's taking a walk outside, going to the gym, or going, to a workout class has been really meaningful for me.
Yeah, I think for me as well, physical movement's definitely crucial. But for me, like sitting down with just with myself, reading something, that helps a lot for me to introspect and to, think through the, decisions I've been making and like everything that I've been doing.
So when you say reading something, give me an example because I don't know that. I mean, are you getting that kind of? Are you getting resourced by reading tech reports? Or are you getting resourced by reading something more introspective?
I think something more introspective. Like the other day, I was reading this book, The Road to Character, and it helped me reflect on like what kind of a founder I want to be, or like what kind of person I want to be as I'm building this. So I think those kind of things. Of course, like the actual like technical reports, research papers that I would read in the line of work anyway. But doing like off the beat reading, like that helps like kind of put myself in a more like I would say relaxed state and more introspective state.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. I love that. Any last words you want to share with our audience, which are founders, early stage founders?
I would say go after hard problems and like just let yourself be free, like from like any fears around like what would happen and all of that. Like I think things eventually end up falling in place if you keep like striving forward.
Jenny?
I would say to never let yourself be the one who takes away an opportunity. I think that especially for female founders, there's sometimes an element of self-doubt or the feeling of not being good enough for something or not being deserving of an opportunity. But I always tell myself that if anything, I'm not going to be the one who turns myself down. I will put myself out there, and if someone else wants to do that, then I will have already, taken a risk and um, put myself one step closer to the opportunity in mind.
I absolutely love both of those. I really appreciate your time. I know it's a busy time. Don't open up that LinkedIn. You're going to be hit with all kinds of sales requests. But really coming on here and sharing your story and sharing the parts that are hard are really helping other people understand what's possible in the startup world today. So I really appreciate your time. Again, we're talking with Jenny and Abhinav of Clare today, and congratulations on the release of the news of your funding. And I can't wait for the public launch of your product.
Thanks, Anna. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. I'm Helena Fogarty, and this was Inside the Round.